The alarm on the colony wall was screaming before I even opened my eyes, and I already knew someone was about to get hurt because of me. I bolted out of my shelter, with my wings half folded and my claws digging into the dirt, and I saw the crowd of humans backing away from the loading dock where a cargo lifter had tipped sideways, its metal frame groaning, sparks spitting from a cracked power cell underneath. Children were screaming, adults were shouting names, and right in the middle of it, frozen between the tilting machine and a wall he could not climb fast enough, stood a small boy who could not have been more than 6 years old. My name is Vesa, and I am the only Veiltherin on this human colony, and in that moment, nobody was thinking about my horns or my tail or the warnings people whispered about me. They were only thinking about the boy. I moved before I could stop myself. My body remembered how to run long before my mind caught up, and I crossed the distance in 4 strides, my claws throwing up dust, my wings snapping open for balance. The lifter groaned louder, tipping further, and I threw myself between the boy and the falling metal, wrapping my wings around him like a shield made of leather and bone. The impact hit my back instead of his head. It hurt. It hurt in a bright, sharp way that made my vision flash white for a second, but I did not let go. When the dust settled, I heard his heartbeat before I heard his voice, fast and small against my chest. I unfolded my wings slowly, checking him first, the way I would check anything precious that I had almost broken by accident. He looked up at me with wide brown eyes, dust in his hair, and I braced myself for the scream. Humans usually screamed when they saw me this close. My face was not built for softness. My teeth were too many and too sharp, my eyes too yellow, my voice too low and rough for comfort. He did not scream. He smiled. It was such a small thing, just a curve of his mouth, a gap where one of his front teeth was missing, but it hit me harder than the falling lifter had. Nobody smiled at me, not once, not in all my years on this colony. Children were pulled away from me by their parents. Adults thanked me for my strength, and then found reasons to leave. I had grown so used to being useful and unwanted at the same time that I had built a wall around the part of me that still hoped for anything different. And this boy, this small human boy with a missing tooth and dust in his hair, was smiling at me like I was something wonderful instead of something dangerous. "You caught me," he said, like it was the most exciting thing that had ever happened to him. Before I could answer, the crowd reached us. A woman pushed through first, her face pale with fear, and she grabbed the boy and pulled him against her so hard, he made a small surprised sound. That was his mother, I would learn later, and her name was Elena. She looked at me over his head, and for a moment, I expected the same look everyone gave me, the careful distance, the polite fear. Instead, she said, "Thank you," and her voice cracked in the middle of it. I did not know what to do with gratitude that sounded like that, so I only nodded and stepped back, folding my wings tight against my spine, ready to disappear the way I always did after moments like this. Ready to go back to the edge of the colony, where I lived alone, where nobody expected anything from me except my strength, when something needed lifting, or something needed saving. But the boy reached out from his mother's arms, and grabbed my claw with his small hand. "Wait," he said, "can we play?" The crowd went quiet. I felt every eye on us, waiting to see what I would do, waiting to see what his mother would do, waiting for someone to pull him away and explain to him gently that dragon girls were not for playing with, that dragon girls were for emergencies and heavy lifting and standing guard at the edge of the fence line where the wild things lived. Elena looked down at her son, then up at me, and something in her face softened. "His name is Toby," she said. "He's been asking about you since he was old enough to point at the sky and ask what flies that high." I did not understand. I looked between them, my tail curling nervously behind me, a habit I had never managed to break. "He wants to play with the dragon," Elena said, like it was the simplest thing in the world. "So maybe you should let him." That was how it started. Not with a grand ceremony or a speech from the colony council, but with a small boy holding onto my claw in the settling dust of an emergency, refusing to let go, smiling like the world had just gotten bigger and better. The days that followed were strange, in a way I did not have words for. Toby found me in the mornings before his lessons, running across the open ground between the human houses and my shelter at the tree line, calling my name before he even reached me. At first I thought it was a mistake that would fix itself. I thought his mother would grow worried, or the council would grow cautious, and someone would decide that a child playing beside a creature with claws longer than his arm was not wise. Nobody stopped him. He brought me things. A smooth stone from the riverbank that he said looked like one of my scales. A drawing, done in wide, careless crayon strokes, of a dragon and a boy standing under two suns, holding hands, or holding claw and hand, however a 6-year-old imagines such a thing. He told me stories about his day that had no real point, except that he wanted to tell them to someone, and somehow, that someone had become me. I taught him things too. I showed him how to read the wind by watching the grass bend, which was useful for flying, and, it turned out, also useful for knowing when a storm was coming before the colony's weather station did. I showed him the difference between the calls of the safe birds and the calls of the ones that meant trouble was near. I let him sit on my back, just once, just for a moment, while I kept my wings folded and walked slowly along the fence line, and he laughed so hard and so bright that 2 of the colony guards came running, thinking something was wrong, only to find a boy shrieking with joy instead of fear. Word spread the way it does in small places. Other children began to watch from a distance, curious now instead of afraid, because if the dragon girl was gentle enough for Toby, maybe she was gentle enough for them too. I did not push it. I let them come at their own pace, the way I would let any wary animal approach in its own time, because I understood caution better than almost anyone on that colony. I had lived inside it my whole life. Then came the night the real storm arrived, the kind the weather station had missed, because the readings had been wrong, the kind that tore panels off roofs and sent trees crashing into fences. I was already awake when it hit, some old instinct in my blood sensing the pressure change long before the alarms caught up. I ran through the colony in the driving rain, checking shelters, pulling loose debris away from windows, and then I heard it. A voice, small and afraid, calling my name from somewhere near the riverbank, where the water was rising fast. Toby had gone out after his forgotten toy, the wooden bird his grandfather had carved for him, and the water had already climbed past his knees by the time I found him, the current pulling hard enough to worry even me. I did not think. I never think in those moments, not really. My body simply moves the way it moved on the day of the lifter, and I was in the water before the fear could catch up to me. The current was strong, stronger than I expected, and for one long, terrible second it pulled us both under, cold and dark and roaring in my ears. I held him against my chest with one arm and used the other along with my wings, half swimming, half climbing along the submerged rocks, until I found footing solid enough to push us both up onto the bank. We lay there in the mud and the rain, both of us gasping, both of us shaking, and Toby's small hand found mine again, just like it had the very first day. "You saved me twice now," he said, teeth chattering, and then, impossibly, he smiled again. I carried him back through the storm to his mother's door, and Elena opened it before I even knocked, like she had been standing there the whole time, waiting, hoping. She took him from my arms and held him so tightly he squeaked, and then she looked at me, soaked and shivering and covered in mud, and she did something no adult on that colony had ever done before. She hugged me too. It was awkward, my size against hers, my scales against her rain-soaked coat, but it was real, and it undid something in my chest that had been tight and closed for as long as I could remember. After that night, the Colony Council did something official for the first time. They gave me a proper title, guardian of the Eastern settlement, and with it came a proper home, not at the edge of the tree line where I had always kept myself apart, but closer, among the human houses, where Toby could run to me in under a minute instead of 5. I still remember the first time another child, a girl with braided hair, walked up to me on her own, without her parents nearby, and asked shyly if I would show her how to read the wind too. I remember looking past her and seeing Toby standing a little way off, grinning, because he had told her about me, because he had decided, all on his own, that I was worth telling people about. I had spent my whole life believing that being strong and being wanted were two different things, that I could be useful without ever being loved, that my claws and my size meant I would always stand at the edge of things, watching, protecting, never quite belonging. It took one small boy with a missing tooth and no fear in his eyes to prove me wrong. Nobody ever played with the lonely dragon girl, until a human child smiled and never stopped.